You must master your emotions to manifest your desires. By Audible Insights. Introduction. When your emotional world is left unchecked, it quietly governs every decision you make, every bond you form, and every aspiration you dare to pursue, leaving you feeling trapped by patterns you never consciously chose. Imagine pausing just long enough to notice an emerging wave of self-doubt before it crashes over you, allowing you to decide instead of simply react. In that subtle shift from autopilot to awareness, entire paths of possibility open, revealing a life you never realized you had the power to create. Picture a moment when you felt at war with your own feelings, torn between longing for change and fearing the cost. That tension is not just mental noise. It's a sign that you are ready for something deeper and more lasting than a quick fix or motivational platitude. This journey is about learning to see emotions not as unwelcome intruders, but as vital signals guiding you toward the life you're meant to live. It's about stepping beyond the limitations of inherited beliefs, releasing the weight of unprocessed hurts, and steadily forging a reality built on genuine self-mastery. The chapters ahead will immerse you in the real work of uncovering who you truly are when your emotions no longer hold you hostage. By embracing this process, you'll discover an unshakable sense of authenticity and calm. Your life is about to change in a way that resonates far beyond surface transformations, and it starts the moment you decide to own your inner world. Chapter 1. Unseen Shackles. Imagine a moment in your past when you felt compelled to react in a way you couldn't entirely explain. You may recall a flash of anger that seemed out of proportion, or a wave of doubt that overshadowed an otherwise bright opportunity. These moments aren't random. They reflect patterns formed so long ago that you rarely question them. Yet they exert a profound influence on your daily life, quietly shaping decisions, relationships, and self-perception. Recognizing these unseen shackles is the first step toward genuine emotional freedom. When you realize how deeply your history can distort the present, you open the door to liberation from old beliefs that have silently dictated your responses. Your emotions, in many ways, operate like echoes from yesterday. They link you back to childhood experiences, familial expectations, and cultural narratives you never consciously chose. Over time, you may find yourself moving through the world on autopilot, bound by internal scripts that paint your sense of worth, possibility, and belonging. The transformation this chapter offers is subtle yet powerful. You begin by noticing these scripts instead of surrendering to them unconsciously. In doing so, you shift from being a passive participant in your own story to becoming its deliberate author. One effective way to set this change in motion is to start observing the natural rhythm of your emotions throughout the day. In moments of calm, perhaps while washing dishes or walking to a familiar place, notice how you feel. Are you tense, anxious, or curiously optimistic for no apparent reason? Simply pausing to observe can be a revelation. You begin to realize that you're not always responding to what's happening now, but to triggers you've carried for years. This small act of observation may feel awkward at first, as though you're watching yourself from the outside. Yet it's in that gentle distance that you discover the difference between what is truly happening in the present and what's rising up from past wounds or learned anxieties. Once you start observing, trace the origins of any recurring feelings that capture your attention. Perhaps a knot in your stomach appears every time you think about finances or career changes. Instead of letting it remain a silent weight, ask yourself when you first felt this kind of dread. You might recall a childhood memory of not having enough, or an offhand remark from someone you admired. By gently exploring these roots, you illuminate the path your emotions took to settle into your current worldview. It's not about dwelling on old pain or assigning blame. Rather, It's about seeing how the mind connects present triggers to past experiences. That insight alone loosens the grip these emotions hold, allowing a measure of clarity to emerge. A further step is to name these hidden patterns. It might sound simple, giving a label to a feeling, but a name can be a powerful tool of recognition. If you're always assuming people will judge you harshly, consider calling that pattern the doubtful shadow or something that resonates with you. Naming doesn't trivialize the experience. Instead, it keeps you aware of when it appears. Once labeled, the pattern no longer operates invisibly. You begin to sense its arrival and can acknowledge its presence. Ah, the doubtful shadow is creeping in. This slight shift in perspective transforms an overwhelming emotion into something you can observe with less internal friction, letting you choose how to respond instead of being swept away. Each step, observation, origin tracing, and naming, peels back layers of emotional buildup. You might feel a surge of relief or even sadness as you discover how deeply ingrained some patterns are. The key is to proceed gently. There's no need to fix everything at once. In fact, rushing can create more resistance because old beliefs cling tightly when threatened. Instead, a steady, patient approach allows your conscious mind to integrate these revelations. Over time, you'll notice the ways small choices begin to shift. You may respond to a stressful email with composure rather than frustration, or reach out more openly in moments you once avoided. These incremental changes accumulate into a new reality, one in which you are no longer bound by the unseen shackles that once dictated your story. Looking ahead, consider that the work you begin here sets a foundation for more profound exploration. By noticing the tethers you've dragged behind you, you prepare yourself for the deeper dives to come. It's not just about unearthing painful memories. It's about freeing yourself from the subtle scripts that say, "You can't," or "This always goes wrong," or "Why bother trying?" Recognizing how these scripts infiltrated your life is the precursor to releasing them. With every moment of awareness, you reclaim a piece of your autonomy, setting the stage for genuine emotional mastery. As this chapter closes, reflect on the fresh sense of possibility that arises when you see your emotional underpinnings more clearly. Even if the awareness feels tender or raw, it's the first taste of true freedom from patterns that once felt permanent. Now, instead of viewing emotions as impenetrable forces, you can see them as signals pointing toward what needs to be gently uncovered, healed, or affirmed. The next step in this journey will invite you to look more closely at how echoes from the past still reverberate in the present, revealing the power you hold to disrupt that cycle. A more conscious, self-directed future begins with shining light on the unseen forces that have quietly guided you until now. Chapter 2. Inner Echoes. Recall a moment when a current frustration seemed oddly magnified, as though something far older than the situation itself had taken over. Perhaps you felt unreasonably hurt by a friend's harmless comment, or disproportionately anxious about a routine setback. These amplifications are signs of inner echoes, residual frequencies from past wounds that color your reactions in the present. The promise of this chapter is a shift from seeing these echoes as proof you're too sensitive to recognizing them as hidden signposts pointing to deeper patterns that can be understood and transcended. Sometimes you carry powerful emotional residue from moments that shook your sense of safety or self-worth. You might consciously remember the event, or perhaps you buried the memory over time. Yet the emotional imprint remains, repeatedly surfacing in new contexts that trigger a similar feeling. The transformation here is about reinterpreting those echoes. Rather than living under their weight or dismissing them as unimportant, you learn to view them as a doorway to healing. In other words, the very moments that seem to tear you down can become catalysts for self-awareness and growth. One way to engage with these reverberations is to notice when your emotional reaction feels out of sync with the present situation. If your heart races or your mind jumps to worst-case scenarios with little provocation, pause and consider the possibility that an unresolved past memory is trying to reassert itself. This practice of pausing can be surprisingly effective. By naming the surge, something like, "I feel intense fear right now," you capture the energy in real time rather than letting it run rampant. The simple act of naming a feeling can soften its hold. Once you've acknowledged it, remind yourself, this reaction may not be entirely about now. That statement alone shifts your perspective from helpless reactivity to intentional curiosity. When you sense an echo, bring compassion to the part of you that is reliving an old wound. Visualize yourself gently placing a comforting hand on your heart, or reaching out to the younger version of you who first experienced this pain. This mental image is not about pity, it's about creating a safe space for understanding. You might discover that the old pain came from rejection in childhood or from a relationship that taught you to doubt your worth. Rather than pushing the memory away, grant it your full attention for a few moments. Ask yourself, what did I need back then? By listening closely to the answer, you begin meeting those unmet needs in the present, perhaps by offering genuine encouragement or by daring to be more open with someone you trust. Next, recontextualize the old wound so it no longer dominates your current reality. While you cannot change the past, you can release any outdated conclusions you formed about yourself. For instance, if you believed, "I'm not worthy of consistent love," based on a childhood experience, you can challenge that notion by recalling instances of genuine kindness you've received. Reframing a single limiting belief starts to loosen the emotional grip of those echoes. You aren't erasing the past. You are giving yourself permission to interpret it differently, one that serves your present well-being rather than undermines it. To support this new framing, you can practice an internal dialogue whenever you sense those echoes trying to shape your response. In that dialogue, acknowledge that old experiences influenced how you reacted in the past. Then, gently affirm a more empowering truth for the current moment. For example, if you find yourself withdrawing from people out of fear they might abandon you, remind yourself, "It's possible for me to be valued and respected, and I can take a small step toward connection today." Over time, these micro-adjustments accumulate. You start to see that, while echoes may still arise, their impact softens as your more conscious voice grows stronger. It's also helpful to recognize the positive intention behind these echoes. At some point, your mind began heightening certain emotional responses to protect you from real harm. By overestimating threats, you attempted to avoid further pain. Appreciating that aspect of self-protection can transform feelings of frustration toward your reactions into a sense of gratitude for how fiercely you tried to keep yourself safe. Once you honor that positive intent, you can gently update your internal system. "Thank you for keeping me alert, but I'm safe to explore these experiences differently now." This compassionate mindset allows you to integrate past protection with present awareness. By the end of this exploration, you may still feel echoes in moments of stress, but now you see them as familiar visitors rather than unbearable intruders. You have concrete steps to address them. Notice the surge, name it, explore its origin, offer self-compassion, and recontextualize. Though it takes practice, each episode becomes an opportunity to heal another layer of old pain. This is how the grip of past wounds begins to weaken, and your emotional responses become more aligned with the here and now, rather than shaped by what happened years ago. As you reflect on this chapter, consider how freeing it is to realize you aren't permanently bound to a pattern of overreaction or withdrawal. The old triggers may arise, but with gentle examination, you reclaim the power to respond in a new way. You have taken a significant step toward dismantling the barriers that keep you from living fully in the present. Next, you will turn your attention to the concept of choice in every emotional reaction, discovering that even the most overwhelming feelings can be navigated by embracing the possibility of a mindful, purposeful decision. That realization will underscore the core truth you're discovering. While the past may echo, your current reality can be shaped by the awareness you bring right now. Chapter 3. Choice Points. Imagine a split second between an emotional trigger and your automatic response, an almost imperceptible pause in which an alternative path awaits. Too often, that moment slips by, leaving you feeling as if your anger, fear, or frustration has taken the wheel without your permission. Yet even in the most heated situations, you always retain a sliver of choice, to follow the habitual route or to steer toward a response that aligns with who you truly want to be. Recognizing that you have a choice in how you react, however brief that window might seem, transforms your emotional landscape from a chaotic battleground into a realm of deliberate action. It's common to feel as though emotions hijack your thoughts and behaviors, especially when a stressful situation hits unexpectedly. Your heart races, your breathing quickens, and you can sense adrenaline coursing through your veins. In these moments, the mind often falls back on learned survival instincts, creating a script that runs on autopilot. However, the shift explored here is about moving from pure reaction to purposeful selection. When you realize that no matter the surge of emotion, there is still a small opening for intention, you reclaim a powerful sense of autonomy. This is not about suppressing your feelings, but about guiding them in a direction that serves your deeper values and aspirations. Start by practicing a simple pause during moments when emotions begin to flare. Whenever you notice tension rising, maybe a subtle clenching of your jaw or a flash of irritation, take one slow, measured breath. This single breath interrupts the chain of reactivity, granting you a precious heartbeat of time to consider what you want to do next. Although it may sound almost too simple, learning to pause is often the hardest part. You might be tempted to dismiss a conscious breath as insignificant, but in truth, it's a quiet assertion of your power. In that deliberate inhale and exhale, you demonstrate to yourself that your emotions do not have to decide for you. Once you've created that space, visualize the potential outcomes of different reactions. This mental trial run can be brief. You imagine how it might feel to lash out, to withdraw, or to respond calmly. By seeing these paths, you anchor yourself in the idea that you do have options, even when your body feels hijacked by emotion. This isn't about shaming yourself for a typical response. It's about expanding your repertoire of choices. In many cases, simply acknowledging your capacity to respond in multiple ways diffuses the pressure that fuels impulsive emotional outbursts. During this exploratory phase, it helps to keep in mind a clear vision of the person you want to be. Perhaps you aspire to be steady under pressure, or to approach conflict with grace rather than anger. Holding this self-image in your mind can guide you toward more thoughtful responses. When the heat of the moment tempts you to explode or retreat, recalling that aspirational image can help you decide. If I want to become that person, how would they act right now? Each time you choose a more intentional response, you reinforce new neural pathways that make it easier to pause and steer your emotions in future challenges. If you struggle with remembering to pause, consider creating gentle reminders in your daily environment. You might place a small note on your desk that says, "One breath," or set a subtle alert on your phone to prompt mindful reflection. Though it may feel forced at first, these cues become part of your awareness toolkit. Over time, your mind begins to recognize the early signs of rising tension. Instead of lurching straight into reactive mode, you remember that breath or that self-image, and you navigate the wave of emotion with greater clarity. Following these steps, you start to see the profound effects of reclaiming choice in everyday interactions. A coworker's harsh remark no longer provokes an immediate snap. A traffic jam ceases to ruin your entire mood. Rather than seeing yourself as at the mercy of emotional tides, you gain confidence in your ability to respond in alignment with your values. This empowerment is not about denying your feelings. On the contrary, it's about honoring them while still choosing the direction you move. The more you practice, the more instinctive your pause and your chosen action become. As this chapter ends, let yourself reflect on the new sense of agency you've uncovered. Even the briefest pause can dismantle long-standing patterns, reminding you that every emotional moment contains a choice point. That knowledge alone is liberating, breathing possibility into interactions that once felt locked in recurring frustration. From here, your journey will continue into aspects of emotional mastery that revolve around acceptance and release, ensuring that you can sustain the poise you've just begun to cultivate. Embrace this understanding of choice as a compass. It will guide you toward navigating life's storms without surrendering control of your emotional realm. Chapter 4. Releasing Judgment. There are times when a rush of anger, envy, or sorrow can leave you feeling as if you failed some unspoken test of emotional maturity. You might find yourself silently labeling these emotions as bad or unacceptable, feeding an undercurrent of shame that only intensifies the discomfort. Instead of simply experiencing the feeling, you layer it with judgment, making it that much heavier to carry. This chapter invites you to release the burden of condemning yourself for the emotions you feel, unveiling a path toward calm acceptance that opens new space for growth. If you've ever chastised yourself for not being able to just get over it, you've witnessed how judging emotions can create unnecessary tension. Like a reflex, you might dismiss your sadness as weakness or berate yourself for feeling jealousy when you think you should be more evolved. However, these judgments don't dispel the emotion. They compound it, creating a cycle of internal conflict that can erode self-trust. The transformation here is to recognize that every feeling, no matter how uncomfortable, contains valuable data about your inner world. In learning to accept each emotion as it arises, you begin to work with your emotional energy instead of feeling trapped under its weight. Acceptance doesn't mean indulging every impulse. It's about acknowledging an emotion without labeling it as inherently good or bad. For instance, if you catch yourself feeling angry, let the feeling exist for a moment without rushing to justify it or push it away. That might look like pausing in the midst of tension and silently telling yourself, "I notice anger in my body right now." You could feel heat rising in your chest, or your breathing might turn shallow. These observations are the beginning of acceptance. You're simply describing what's happening without accusing yourself of failing in some moral sense. As you allow the emotion to be there, you may sense a mild discomfort. Perhaps your mind starts searching for reasons why you're wrong to feel this way. Yet if you stay present, you'll often notice the sharp edges of the feeling begin to soften. This is because you haven't fueled it with shame or tried to drive it out prematurely. Acceptance can be surprisingly soothing, like giving a tense muscle permission to relax. In these moments of allowing, you begin to uncover the genuine message the emotion carries. Anger, for example, might be signaling that you feel a boundary was crossed. Sadness could reveal a deeper longing for connection or meaning. By refraining from judgment, you create room for insight that can guide you to respond more constructively. A second step in releasing judgment involves consciously offering kindness to yourself when challenging emotions surface. Think of how you might comfort a close friend who feels upset. No stern lectures or sweeping dismissals, just a patient, understanding presence. You can extend that same warmth inward. If self-criticism flares up, gently redirect. It's okay for me to feel this. I can explore it without condemning myself. This pivot toward compassion transforms what might have been a spiral of self-attack into a moment of tender self-recognition. Over time, these small acts of self-compassion accumulate, reshaping your internal climate so that emotions, even painful ones, feel less threatening. It's natural for doubts to arise in this process. You might worry that accepting negative emotions could cause them to linger or grow stronger. But in reality, the opposite often happens. When you permit your feelings to surface without immediate punishment, they tend to dissipate more gracefully. By not feeding the emotion with judgment, you reduce the friction that keeps it stuck. This doesn't mean you won't sometimes need to take action, perhaps to resolve a conflict or address an unmet need. But any steps you do take will be rooted in clarity rather than guilt or resentment. As you develop this habit, you'll begin to notice a shift in how you relate to yourself overall. Instead of fearing your emotions, you approach them with an almost curious respect. You become more attuned to what triggers certain feelings and why, which in turn helps you navigate life with a greater sense of control. Paradoxically, this internal acceptance boosts your confidence in handling whatever arises externally. You realize that you don't need to be emotionally perfect to respond effectively to life's challenges. You simply need to be open and willing to acknowledge the full spectrum of your inner experience. When concluding this chapter, let yourself sense the difference between being at war with your emotions and coexisting with them in a non-judgmental way. It might feel like a fresh breeze after a long, stifling day, an opening where before there was tension. Releasing judgment is a crucial step in emotional mastery because it removes the layer of shame that keeps you locked in old patterns. Now, you can begin to see every emotion as a messenger, not a tyrant. From here, you will have the energy and space to transform those feelings into purposeful action. As you move forward, remember that this acceptance sets the stage for even deeper insights, ones that empower you to transform raw emotional intensity into fuel for personal growth, rather than letting it weigh you down. The next chapter will guide you toward harnessing that emotional energy, showing you how to transmute it into a catalyst for real, tangible change in your life. Chapter 5. Emotional Alchemy. Visualize a moment when frustration, sadness, or even elation surged through you with potent force, a simmering energy that felt overwhelming. Emotions can often seem like pure chaos, hijacking your thoughts and dictating your actions. But within that swirling intensity lies a hidden potential. The concept of emotional alchemy centers on transforming these raw feelings into something constructive, rather than letting them weigh you down or fade without benefit. By viewing emotions as energy that can be redirected, you shift from feeling controlled by your emotional states to recognizing them as resources for growth, creativity, and meaningful change. It's common to associate powerful emotions, whether positive or negative, with an urge to either suppress or indulge. In doing so, we miss a vital opportunity. Emotional alchemy begins by acknowledging the deep well of energy an intense feeling offers. Think of anger, for instance, as a compressed signal that something needs to be addressed. While unchanneled anger can spark harmful impulses, that same force, when harnessed, can lend the courage to set firm boundaries or fuel determination to improve a difficult situation. Similarly, sadness, which often feels heavy and depleting, can serve as a guide to what matters most, inviting you to reconnect with core values or neglected parts of yourself. To begin this alchemical process, allow yourself a clear moment of awareness when a strong emotion arises. Instead of drowning in it or pushing it aside, pause and name it. I'm feeling intense anger, or "this sadness is deep." By labeling the feeling, you pinpoint its presence in your consciousness. You might notice a surge of heat or a tightening in your chest. Rather than fleeing these sensations, breathe into them gently. Imagine expanding the space around the emotion, giving it room to be felt without automatically concluding it's bad or scary. This act of naming and breathing begins to transform the emotion from an all-consuming wave into a focal point of insight. As you hold the emotion in awareness, ask yourself, what is the underlying message here? Anger may reveal a fear of betrayal, while sorrow might highlight longing for authentic connection. You're not trying to solve every aspect at once. You're simply digging one layer deeper to understand the root. Through this understanding, the emotional energy starts to shift in quality. It becomes less random and more purposeful, aligning with a meaningful cause or unmet need. In that alignment, you find the driving force for change. Instead of letting the feeling loop endlessly in your mind, you funnel it into an intention. Let this anger guide me to set healthy limits, or let this sorrow reconnect me with what I cherish. Next comes the step of translating that intention into tangible action. In moments of anger, for example, you might channel the intensity into writing down how you want a relationship or environment to evolve. If a boundary has been crossed, direct that emotional energy toward calmly but firmly articulating what needs to change. In the case of sadness, you could harness that gentle vulnerability to reach out to someone you trust, expressing both your grief and your willingness to heal. The key is ensuring each action genuinely honors the emotion's core message. This approach turns the surge of feeling into a constructive force, leaving you with a sense of empowerment rather than regret. An important part of this process is reflection afterward. Notice how you feel once you've taken a step aligned with the emotion's deeper purpose. Do you sense relief, renewed clarity, or a lingering tension? This reflection helps you refine your approach over time, teaching you how best to channel various emotional states. You begin to trust that even the most painful or challenging emotions carry seeds of transformation if you're willing to meet them with openness. What once seemed like a curse, strong waves of sadness, anger, or anxiety, can become an invitation to evolve. Emotional alchemy, then, is about partnership with your inner world. Rather than viewing intense emotions as inconveniences or enemies, you greet them as visitors bearing information. Through conscious awareness, clear intention, and aligned action, you transmute emotional upheaval into meaningful progress. This reframed perspective lifts you out of the cycle of battling or repressing feelings, granting you a steady resilience. As you continue on this path, you'll discover that every raw emotion can help you create something new. A boundary that fosters respect, a conversation that heals a wound, or a project that channels profound passion. Carrying this approach forward, you'll find that not all transformations happen immediately. Some emotions will require repeated encounters before they fully release their lessons. Yet with each deliberate choice to acknowledge and direct emotional energy, you strengthen your capacity to shape life on your terms. Reflect on this new understanding and consider the possibilities it opens. A more purposeful expression of who you are, guided by the power that once felt overwhelming. By tapping into emotional alchemy, you equip yourself to enter each subsequent stage of this journey with an ever-growing sense of creativity, assurance, and self-respect. The next step awaits, where you'll delve deeper into breaking resistance that hinders your forward momentum, ensuring that the energy you've now learned to harness can flow freely toward your true desires. Chapter 6. Dissolving Resistance. Think back to a time when you set an intention for change. Perhaps you decided to leave a draining job or adopt a healthier lifestyle, and yet you felt an unspoken tug pulling you back. Even as you longed to move forward, part of you seemed reluctant to let go of familiar habits. This inner conflict, often hidden beneath layers of logic and justifications, is resistance. It manifests as procrastination, self-doubt, and subtle self-sabotage, all driven by unconscious fears about what happens once you actually transform. The invitation here is to notice how that resistance operates and learn to soften its hold, allowing your desires to unfold without the constant friction of internal pushback. If you've ever said, "I want this so badly, but I'm just not making progress," you've likely felt that quiet, confounding barrier. On the surface, resistance can look like a lack of motivation or a sudden spike in more important tasks that conveniently appear whenever you try to focus on your goal. Underneath, there may be concerns about what success could cost you, whether losing the closeness of people who knew you a certain way, or simply facing life on unfamiliar terms. This chapter reframes resistance not as a character flaw, but as a signal that something within you remains unconvinced of the safety or wisdom of the change you seek. The first step in dissolving this internal friction is to acknowledge it without judgment. Notice the patterns that emerge when you approach a long-held dream or a crucial shift. Do you find yourself mysteriously short on time? Do doubts about your abilities grow louder? Recognition is crucial because resistance thrives in the shadows of denial. Simply telling yourself, "It's okay that I'm hesitating," can remove some of the shame that often accompanies stalled progress. That willingness to be honest sets the stage for deeper understanding. Once you allow yourself to see the hesitancy for what it is, a protection mechanism, you can engage in a calmer internal dialogue. In that dialogue, invite the part of you that resists to speak openly. This can feel odd at first, as though you're talking to a separate person inside your mind, but it offers valuable insights. Ask what your resistance fears about achieving the goal. Sometimes the fear is concrete, losing the comfort of a known environment or facing potential judgment from others. Other times, it's more abstract, like worrying you won't recognize yourself if you actually break a lifelong pattern. Listening to these concerns can reveal the emotional undercurrents fueling your inertia. By hearing them out, you begin to reassure these wary aspects of yourself that their needs, such as safety, belonging, or stability, can still be honored in a new reality. Next, consider how to address the legitimate concerns raised by your inner resistance. If fear of judgment is present, you might remind yourself that your real allies will support your growth, and that navigating criticism is a manageable price to pay for authenticity. If the worry is about losing familiarity, you can affirm your capacity to adapt, remembering past instances when you successfully navigated unknown territory. Instead of waging a war against resistance, you shift to collaboration. You show yourself that change doesn't have to mean recklessness, and that you can proceed in steps that feel safe enough to your protective instincts. This approach gently loosens the knot of contradiction. An effective way to support this collaboration is by anchoring deeply into your why. When resistance arises, you return to the core reasons you want the change. Perhaps you crave genuine fulfillment in your career or yearn to build deeper, more nourishing relationships. By letting that inner drive resonate in your mind, you counterbalance the pull of your old comfort zone. This renewed sense of purpose, combined with compassion for the part of you that hesitates, gradually erodes the walls blocking your path. What felt like immovable obstacles become invitations to refine your understanding of yourself, ensuring that any shift you make is rooted in genuine conviction rather than surface-level determination. Notice, too, the role of self-fulfilling prophecy in resistance. When you assume you're too inconsistent to achieve your goal, you might unconsciously choose actions that confirm this belief. You skip small steps because it won't matter anyway. then find proof that you're failing. Awareness of this pattern helps you break it. Each day, you can choose one tangible action that reaffirms faith in your ability to progress, however slowly. You're training your mind to expect a different outcome. Over time, these consistent choices accumulate, subtly convincing the resistant part of you that growth is not a threat but a possibility. Stepping away from this chapter, notice how resistance need not be an enemy to conquer. Instead, it's a teacher offering clues about which parts of your psyche need reassurance or clarity. By acknowledging resistance as a natural reaction to change, understanding the fears beneath it, and addressing those fears with both compassion and intention, you gradually release the tight grip of self-sabotage. As this grip loosens, you'll find more harmony between your deepest desires and your everyday actions. This sense of internal alignment propels you forward into the next phase of your emotional mastery, where honesty about what you truly want becomes a powerful catalyst for living more authentically. As you move on, you'll explore how articulating these genuine desires fuels transformation in a way that feels both liberating and profoundly aligned. Chapter 7. Honest Desires. Think about a moment when you caught a glimpse of a dream you'd been afraid to admit, an ambition, a lifestyle, or a vision of success that stirred genuine excitement in you. Yet just as quickly, you may have dismissed it as impractical or indulgent, labeling it a guilty pleasure or something that only others achieve. This reflex to mute true longings often arises from a fear of judgment, either from our own internal critic or from external voices we imagine would disapprove. But when you bury your real desires beneath layers of half-truths and socially acceptable goals, you distance yourself from the fuel that propels authentic transformation. This chapter centers on the power of acknowledging, claiming, and moving toward what your heart truly craves, rather than what you've been told you should want. Your genuine desires are like a lighthouse, guiding you to a version of life aligned with your deepest values. The problem is, many of us live behind a facade of aspirations shaped by family expectations, peer pressure, or cultural norms. You might find yourself pursuing achievements that look good on paper but feel hollow, wondering why every milestone leaves you restless. The shift explored here involves letting go of external scripts and giving yourself permission to unearth what lies beneath. By getting honest about what you truly crave, you ignite a new sense of vitality and purpose, one that's far more sustainable than chasing someone else's blueprint for success. Begin by separating the shoulds from the wants. Carve out quiet time to list what you believe you should desire, perhaps a certain type of career, a neat relationship path, or a status symbol that confers legitimacy in others' eyes. Then list what you actually want, even if those desires seem audacious or unconventional. You might feel a jolt of unease when you admit certain longings, like changing careers later in life or living abroad for a year, but that unease signals you're inching closer to your true core. Notice if the shoulds outweigh your authentic inclinations. This exercise alone can reveal how entrenched external standards have become, while also illuminating how you've been censoring your authentic voice. After creating these lists, pick one desire from your want list that sparks genuine excitement or a sense of possibility. Sit with it, allowing yourself to feel the emotions it stirs, maybe curiosity, joy, or even a little fear. Instead of dismissing it, affirm that it's acceptable to desire something that isn't neatly sanctioned by others. If self-criticism arises, remind yourself that honest desires are the starting point of true self-discovery, not evidence of selfishness or impractical dreaming. In many cases, the only validation your dreams require is your own willingness to explore them. Granting yourself permission to want what you truly want also means facing the fear that you might fail or face judgment in pursuit of it. But the cost of ignoring what resonates within you can be even greater, leading to a life shaped by obligation rather than genuine passion. By acknowledging an honest desire, you open the door to incremental steps that can bring it closer to reality. For instance, if you yearn to write a book, you might start by dedicating a few minutes each evening to brainstorming or jotting ideas. Even small actions affirm that your desire matters. These gestures serve as votes of confidence in your own authenticity, helping you build momentum one choice at a time. As you walk this path, remain attentive to any emotional shifts. You might notice renewed enthusiasm in your day-to-day routine, or feel a sense of relief at no longer hiding behind half-hearted goals. Unexpected moments of inspiration can surface once you've given your mind permission to consider alternatives. Challenges may still arise, logistical hurdles, moments of doubt, but when your aspiration stems from genuine longing, you possess a reservoir of motivation to navigate them. The sense of alignment that comes from honoring your deepest wants often grants the resilience needed to persevere. Throughout this process, it's crucial to practice consistent self-honesty. Revisit your want list periodically and update it as you evolve. Desires can shift over time, and what once felt urgent may become less relevant after a season of growth. There's no shame in refining your vision. The point is to stay connected to the authenticity of your inner voice, ensuring it remains the compass guiding your decisions. When you catch yourself slipping back into should thinking, gently refocus on what truly resonates in your heart. As you conclude this chapter, let yourself sense the liberation that comes from acknowledging your genuine desires. Even if they remain distant goals, the mere act of recognizing them infuses your life with clarity and excitement. You step away from the heaviness of trying to please others or live up to expectations you never fully embraced. Instead, you begin to operate from a place of sincerity, which in turn fosters deeper connection to yourself and to anyone who appreciates the real you. By accepting what you genuinely want, you lay a powerful foundation for the ongoing journey of emotional mastery. Next, you'll see how the practice of returning to the present moment can amplify this authenticity, creating a stable ground from which your true desires can flourish. Chapter 8. The Power of Presence. Consider a day when you found yourself lost in plans for a future vacation or tangled in regrets about something you'd said days earlier, barely aware of what was actually happening around you. So often, life moves on autopilot. We complete tasks mechanically, nod during conversations without truly listening, and look at our surroundings without really seeing them. The result is a perpetual sense of disconnection, where our emotions seem to drift uncontrollably, tethered more to mental chatter than to genuine experience. This chapter reveals how grounding yourself in the present moment can soothe restless thoughts, sharpen your emotional awareness, and restore a sense of wholeness that distractions constantly erode. Even a brief moment of awareness, like pausing to notice the sound of your breath, can feel like stepping out of a whirlwind. It's not that your responsibilities or challenges vanish. Rather, you become fully engaged with them. And in that engagement, you find a steadiness that eludes you when your mind jumps between the past's regrets and the future's uncertainties. The transformation unfolds as you realize that presence is more than a wellness trend or a polite reminder to be here now. It's an active practice, one that allows your emotions to settle enough for you to see them clearly and to respond rather than react. By anchoring in the here and now, you shift from living in mental stories to inhabiting the concrete reality of this moment, exactly as it is. To begin cultivating presence, try intentionally slowing down a daily routine. It might be the act of washing dishes, sipping your morning beverage, or taking a short walk. Instead of rushing through it, direct your attention toward your senses. Notice the warmth of the water on your hands, the aroma rising from the cup, or the texture of the ground beneath your feet. Initially, you might feel restless or even bored, as though you're wasting time. However, each moment you spend truly engaged reminds you that your life unfolds right here, not in the hypothetical scenarios spinning in your mind. You'll find that even mundane tasks carry a gentle depth when you attend to them fully, cultivating an inner calm that extends well beyond the activity at hand. As you practice, pay attention to the emotional shifts that accompany genuine presence. In those instances when your mind is wholly absorbed by what you're doing, anxieties about the future or guilt about the past tend to fade. That doesn't mean problems magically resolve themselves. Rather, you gain clarity and a quieter mental environment from which to address them. Consider how racing thoughts usually intensify worry or anger, fueling the sense that you must do something right away, often leading to impulsive choices. Presence acts as a counterweight, reminding you that while planning and reflection have their place, they become more effective when you're not caught in a mental storm. To deepen this shift, experiment with short check-ins throughout the day. Every couple of hours, pause briefly and take note of your mental and emotional state. Ask yourself, am I present in this moment or is my attention elsewhere? Then, let your senses inform you. What do you see, hear, or feel right now? Even a 20-second check-in can ground you, especially during hectic days. Over time, these small interventions create a habit of returning to the moment whenever you feel yourself drifting into unproductive rumination. You begin to sense how each present moment pause resets your internal pace, granting you a stable foundation from which to make decisions. This practice of returning to the now also dismantles the illusion that constant mental busyness equals progress. True productivity flourishes when your actions arise from a calm, focused mind rather than from anxious overthinking. Whether it's drafting a proposal or engaging in a heartfelt conversation, your effectiveness grows as presence becomes your default setting. You'll discover a certain spaciousness in your mind, a quiet backdrop against which ideas can form more organically. Likewise, relationships can deepen because you're genuinely listening, catching nuances of tone and body language that once slipped by unnoticed. That kind of attentive presence fosters empathy and understanding, further enriching your interactions. If you notice your thoughts wander during these practices, and you will, that's not a sign of failure. In fact, recognizing when your focus drifts is part of the exercise. Each time you redirect your attention, you build mental muscles that support sustained awareness. Like learning any new skill, your capacity to remain present strengthens with consistent, patient effort. You might begin to see your mind's tendency to drift as a chance to practice gentle redirection, rather than a mistake to be criticized. This shift in perspective prevents you from piling frustration onto your attempt at mindful living. As you move through this chapter's insights, reflect on how presence relates to the emotional mastery you've been cultivating. The calmer you become in each moment, the less likely you are to be tossed about by old triggers or future anxieties. You respond to life's events instead of reflexively bracing against them. In that response lies your emerging power. You gain the freedom to choose how you engage with your emotions, inviting curiosity rather than harsh judgment. And as this presence takes root, you'll find it easier to release the urge to control uncontrollable outcomes, a theme you'll explore further in the next chapter. There, you'll see how surrendering the illusion of total control can lighten your emotional load and open the door to even greater levels of trust and peace. For now, embrace the gift of the present moment. Each breath you fully inhabit serves as a testament to your growing capacity to master the only point in time you ever truly inhabit, right now. Chapter 9. Surrendering Control. Recall a time when you clung desperately to an outcome, double-checking details, rehearsing conversations in your head, and feeling helpless if events even slightly deviated from your plan. In that rigid stance, a single inconvenience or unexpected change can stir intense frustration or anxiety, revealing that the tight grip of control can become a cage. Attempting to micromanage every facet of life not only drains emotional energy, it also blinds you to opportunities that arise when you allow some room for spontaneity and trust. This chapter explores how releasing the illusion of total control can free you from the chronic tension of trying to orchestrate every outcome, fostering a deeper sense of peace and open-mindedness. Even if you consider yourself flexible, you may discover subtle ways in which you attempt to impose control. You might carefully script how a relationship should evolve, or feel uneasy when spontaneous tasks arise in your workday. These habits often form from a desire for security, a hope that if you anticipate every contingency, you'll avoid chaos or harm. Yet life inevitably slips outside those parameters, leaving you either drained from constant vigilance or disappointed when your careful plans unravel. Surrendering some control is not about neglecting responsibility. It's about accepting that, while you can influence many aspects of your life, you can't guarantee a precise outcome. This acceptance creates space for calmer, more adaptive responses. Begin by identifying an area where you sense a strong need for control. Perhaps it's finances, your schedule, or your relationships. Notice when you feel anxious or annoyed because reality isn't matching your script. You might experience agitation in your body, a tightening in your shoulders, or a racing heartbeat. In such moments, pause and name the tension. I feel unsettled because events aren't happening as I predicted. By labeling the feeling, you anchor yourself in awareness rather than letting reactivity spiral. Simply recognizing that your mind is demanding control can diminish its grip, offering a moment to reassess whether the situation truly warrants such rigid oversight. Once you acknowledge the urge for control, gently test the waters of letting go. Pick a small, relatively low-stakes scenario, a minor household decision, or a casual social interaction. Instead of insisting on your usual preferences, let someone else take the lead. This act may trigger discomfort, as though you're inviting uncertainty into your space. However, in consciously choosing to step back, you create a crucial learning opportunity. You observe what actually happens when you're not the one micromanaging. You may find the outcome is fine, or even better, than you anticipated. Through repeated experiments like this, you gather evidence that releasing control doesn't have to spell disaster. Another potent practice is to reflect on the aspects of life that truly lie beyond your control. Events like sudden weather changes, other people's decisions, or market fluctuations are real forces. When you place these uncontrollable elements in a mental list, you become more conscious of the futility in trying to steer them. In response, you might adopt a motto such as, "I release what I cannot direct." Repeating this phrase when anxiety creeps in can help you remember the difference between healthy diligence and trying to manage the unmanageable. It also reminds you to save your energy for areas where your efforts can genuinely make a difference. A powerful shift occurs once you allow life some breathing room. By loosening your grip, you expand the range of possibilities you're open to seeing. That expansion can manifest in unplanned opportunities, surprising insights, or new connections you might have missed while hyper-focused on a single plan. While not every unexpected turn leads to a positive outcome, the ability to adapt with composure is itself a valuable skill. This adaptive mindset often diminishes fear, because you no longer stake your entire sense of security on one narrow path. You become more resilient, trusting that you can navigate challenges even if they don't conform to your ideal script. As you integrate these practices, pay attention to shifts in your emotional state. You may notice less anxiety in daily routines, experiencing them with more ease and curiosity. Conflicts or hiccups might feel less threatening, since you no longer treat them as failures of your planning but as natural parts of the unfolding process. Equally important, you free mental space once occupied by worry, allowing creativity and presence to flourish. Instead of fighting reality at every turn, you move with it, finding clarity in the fluid dance of life's changing currents. Reflecting on this process, you might realize that relinquishing total control feels like a relief rather than a loss. In embracing uncertainty, you discover an underlying sense of freedom. The weight of forever trying to anticipate or force outcomes begins to lift. You accept that, while you can guide your actions and intentions, life has a rhythm of its own that can bring gifts just as easily as challenges. From here, your journey continues toward deeper healing practices, including the potent act of forgiveness that liberates you from emotional burdens. As you transition to the next chapter, keep in mind that a willingness to release control primes you for that act of liberation, clearing old resentments and opening space for renewed emotional fluidity. Chapter 10. Renewal through forgiveness. Visualize a time when you clung to resentment, replaying a hurtful memory in your mind as though it might change the past. In those moments, the hurt can feel so personal that letting go seems like a betrayal of your dignity. Yet that same refusal to forgive often chains you to the very pain you long to escape. This chapter focuses on how the decision to forgive, whether directed at someone else or yourself, releases emotional baggage, paving the way for a new level of freedom. While the act of forgiveness can be daunting, it isn't about condoning harmful actions. It's about freeing your own heart from the burden of sustained anger or sorrow. Consider the toll that lingering resentment exacts from you, the mental real estate consumed by replaying grievances, and the physical stress of bracing each time that memory resurfaces. In some cases, you may even harbor resentment toward yourself for past mistakes. This weight can color your self-image and relationships, creating a cycle of guilt and defensiveness. By exploring forgiveness, you gently break that cycle, choosing to honor your future more than you punish your past. This shift redefines what it means to be strong, not in constant battle, but in your capacity to heal and move on. Begin by acknowledging the layers of pain. If you feel stuck, write a few sentences about how the hurt made you feel and what lasting impact it had on your sense of trust. Seeing the details can clarify why the pain lingers. You might realize it's less about the specific incident and more about the belief it seeded, like, "I'm unlovable" or "I can't rely on anyone." Spotting that deeper belief can help you see the ongoing damage resentment inflicts. In recognizing that damage, you begin to see forgiveness as a means of protecting your well-being rather than a favor to the person who hurt you. Next, consider creating a private ritual of release. This might be as simple as writing a letter expressing your hurt, then tearing it up or discarding it. Whether the wound involves someone else or your own regret, the goal is to give form to the burden so you can symbolically let it go. In the act of letting go, you can whisper or think a phrase like, "I set myself free from this pain." It might feel awkward or forced at first, but these symbolic gestures often help the subconscious mind process what logic alone cannot. Over time, you can repeat the ritual whenever the old resentment flares up, gradually weakening its hold. As forgiveness settles in, notice the subtle emotional relief. You might find yourself breathing more easily or feeling a surge of energy that used to be locked in tension. This does not mean memories vanish or that you minimize any harm done. Rather, it signals that you've chosen to stop carrying the burden of unresolved anger. If you struggle with doubts, wondering if forgiveness makes you vulnerable, remind yourself that releasing bitterness protects you from the corrosive effects of resentment. You're not erasing the past. You're reclaiming the present as a space where you can feel safe and whole again. Keep in mind that forgiving yourself can be equally, if not more, challenging. Perhaps you regret missed opportunities or certain actions that led to painful consequences. In such cases, focus on the lessons gleaned. By acknowledging how you've grown and changed, you honor the fact that the person you are now wouldn't repeat those mistakes. That recognition helps dissolve the shame tethered to your old self, granting you permission to evolve without perpetual self-blame. Each time doubts arise, "I should have known better," counter them with a compassionate reminder. "I did the best I could with who I was and what I knew at the time. I released this hurt to grow." Stepping away from this practice, you might still feel echoes of the old wound, but each act of forgiveness weakens its grasp. Over time, you become more resilient, noticing how freed emotional energy can be invested in friendships, creativity, or personal goals. You also become more discerning about boundaries, ensuring that forgiveness doesn't lead you into repeated harm. Ultimately, the renewal offered by forgiveness rests on self-liberation. You choose to no longer let past injuries dictate your emotional landscape. Having opened that door, you can now move more lightly into the deeper layers of emotional honesty that vulnerability demands. In the next chapter, you'll look at the courage required to be fully transparent with your feelings, an essential step toward forging sincere connections and building self-trust. Chapter 11. Courage in Vulnerability. Imagine finding the words to express the raw truth of your feelings, whether it's fear, heartbreak, or a fragile hope, and daring to share it with someone who matters to you. That first breath before speaking can be laced with apprehension. What if they judge me? What if this changes everything? Yet it's precisely in that risk that meaningful connections and deeper self-understanding are forged. This chapter explores how genuine vulnerability isn't about weakness. Rather, it's a testament to emotional strength. By standing in the open with your uncertainties, you create space for real intimacy with both others and yourself. Vulnerability often carries a stigma. Society frequently equates open emotion with fragility or not having it together. This perspective can stunt honest communication, prompting you to present only curated images of yourself. Over time, the fear of judgment can morph into a pattern of isolation. You might adopt a protective shell that hides your struggles but also blocks genuine connection. Here, the transformation lies in reframing vulnerability as bravery. It demands self-awareness, trust in your resilience, and a willingness to confront possible rejection without self-abandonment. A starting point is to confide a smaller, less daunting truth to someone you trust. Perhaps you share a worry about your career direction or reveal an insecurity about a skill you're trying to master. Notice the response. You might receive empathy, understanding, or a relief in simply voicing what's been pent up. If a positive reaction follows, you build confidence to share more. Even if the response is lukewarm, you learn that you can survive imperfect receptions without your worth being erased. This exercise teaches you that vulnerability is not about assured outcomes, but about living more authentically, regardless of others' reactions. Over time, you can expand this courage into deeper realms, discussing fears about abandonment, revealing regrets, or expressing unspoken desires. Each instance strengthens your capacity for self-honesty. That self-honesty, in turn, fosters a clearer sense of identity. No longer reliant on a polished exterior, you begin to trust that your inherent value stands firm, even if your flaws and yearnings come to light. As you embody this openness, you'll likely notice a shift in your relationships. The ones that matter embrace the truth of who you are, while superficial ties may fall away. Though painful, that shedding of inauthentic bonds makes room for connections that genuinely support your growth. This process also applies to being vulnerable with yourself. You might realize you've been wearing a mask even in private, dismissing your own fears as silly or irrelevant. Grant yourself permission to acknowledge them. Journaling can be an effective tool. Simply write, "I feel nervous about," and let the words flow without censoring them. Reading them back might stir discomfort, but it also cultivates compassion. You see your worries more objectively and begin to accept that these concerns don't negate your strengths. They simply highlight areas where gentleness and healing are still needed. As you reflect on your unfolding vulnerability, track the internal changes. Do you sense more calm and ease in your interactions? Are you feeling less need to posture or overcompensate? Each moment of raw honesty helps dissolve the pressure to appear invulnerable, freeing emotional energy once spent on self-protection. And with that freedom comes deeper, more meaningful connections. When loved ones and trusted peers see the real you, they often respond with genuine concern or admiration, forging an emotional resonance that pretense could never achieve. Ultimately, courage in vulnerability shifts your inner dialogue from "I must hide to be accepted" to "my truths deserve expression." Such a transformation is vital to mastering your emotions because it dismantles the shame that often accompanies deeper feelings. By openly facing the parts of you that are uncertain or scared, you bolster your capacity to handle emotional turbulence. You become less reactive, more grounded, and better prepared to nurture gratitude and confidence. That nurturing spirit sets the stage for the next chapter, where you'll explore how gratitude, when practiced authentically, recalibrates your focus from scarcity to abundance, amplifying all the positive shifts you're creating through your emotional journey. Chapter 12. Energy of Gratitude. Take a moment to recall a scenario in which your concerns about what you lack drowned out any appreciation for what you currently have. Perhaps you were fixated on a personal goal still out of reach, or dwelling on material possessions that seemed inadequate. While ambition and desire can propel growth, they also risk overshadowing the richness already present in your life. This chapter presents gratitude not as a fluffy optimism exercise, but as a powerful recalibration of your emotional baseline. By shifting your internal lens to recognize life's gifts, both large and small, you cultivate a mindset where possibility and contentment coexist. Gratitude begins with noticing what's already working. When life feels rushed or stressful, it's easy to let everyday blessings slip by unnoticed. Even basic conveniences like a warm meal or a safe place to sleep can blend into the background of routine. Yet by explicitly pausing to note these comforts, you anchor your mind in a more balanced perspective. The practice doesn't negate challenges. Rather, it contextualizes them, helping you realize that struggle and blessing often share the same space. This awareness creates a fuller, more nuanced experience of reality. One practical way to strengthen gratitude is a daily reflection, typically done in the evening. Instead of a generic list, identify moments that genuinely touched you. Maybe a friend's unexpected kindness, the sound of laughter echoing in your home, or the sight of sunlight streaming through the window at dawn. Let yourself linger in these memories until you feel a shift, a gentle warmth or relaxation in your body. By allowing the recollection to sink in, you transform gratitude from a mental exercise into an emotional anchor. This shift eventually rewires your internal outlook, nudging you toward noticing uplifting details even in difficult times. Another dimension of gratitude is acknowledging hidden gifts in adversity. When you face a setback or a challenging situation, ask yourself if there's anything it has taught you or any supportive presence you've discovered as a result. This doesn't mean trivializing pain or loss, but rather finding value amidst hardship. You might recognize personal resilience you didn't know you had, or develop closer bonds with those who helped you cope. In reframing adversity this way, you cultivate a balanced outlook that honors both the pain and the growth. Over time, this balanced view fosters resilience as you learn to trust in life's capacity to evolve in unexpected ways. Sharing gratitude outwardly amplifies its effect. A quick text or a sincere word of thanks can spark deeper connection with friends, family, or colleagues. Even small acknowledgments, like telling a coworker how much you appreciate their reliable assistance, can create an environment of mutual respect. Moreover, hearing your own expressions of gratitude reinforces its presence in your mind. You start to notice more and more reasons to be thankful, creating a feedback loop that gradually shifts your emotional baseline toward optimism and openness. This isn't forced positivity. It's a conscious decision to balance life's trials with its small daily wonders. As gratitude takes root, observe the way it softens tensions that might otherwise spiral. When frustration arises, you might recall a few bright spots of the day, preventing negative thoughts from dominating. Gratitude doesn't solve every problem, but it bolsters your emotional landscape with a persistent reminder that life is not exclusively difficulty. This perspective can be the difference between giving up in the face of obstacles and pressing forward with a resilient spirit. You carry an internal assurance that blessings and resources exist, even in trying times. Once you've integrated gratitude into your routine, you'll notice a parallel uptick in confidence and emotional generosity. Recognizing what you have makes you more inclined to share, whether it's time, expertise, or even a supportive ear. This sharing not only benefits others, it reinforces your own sense of abundance. You see that life is richer when you actively participate in circulating kindness. And that sense of richness primes you to explore what it means to embody confidence on a whole new level. A confidence that starts not from external validation, but from the way you hold yourself within. In the next chapter, you'll discover how aligning your body and your mindset fosters an authentic sense of inner poise that can carry you through any emotional storm. Chapter 13. Embodied Confidence. Think of a moment when you squared your shoulders, lifted your head, and felt a subtle surge of assuredness course through you. Conversely, remember a time when your posture sagged, your gaze fell to the floor, and your confidence faded with every exhalation. The mind and body form a continuous loop, each shaping the other in quiet but powerful ways. This chapter delves into how embodied confidence arises when you harness the synergy between physical presence and mental clarity, forging a deep-rooted self-assurance that doesn't hinge on external applause. We often treat confidence as a purely mental trait, something you summon by repeating affirmations or recalling past successes. While such methods can help, they overlook the role your body plays as a constant communicator of how you feel. Slumping shoulders might signal resignation, while restless fidgeting conveys anxiety. More importantly, these gestures feed back into your emotional state, creating a loop that can either undermine or bolster your sense of self. By consciously adjusting your posture, breath, and gestures, you disrupt negative loops and reinforce a steadier internal narrative. Start simply with posture. Whether sitting or standing, lift your sternum slightly, roll your shoulders back, and elongate your spine as though a string at the top of your head were gently pulling you upward. Let your weight settle evenly, releasing tension in your neck and jaw. Notice if your breathing becomes deeper or more rhythmic. That shift in posture tells your nervous system you are in control, not braced for threat. Over time, these small adjustments encourage a quieter mind because your body is no longer broadcasting distress signals. The goal isn't to adopt a rigid stance but to inhabit a posture that fosters both ease and readiness. Breath work amplifies this effect. Try a slow inhale for a count of 4, then exhale for a count of 4. As you do, picture any anxieties or doubts flowing out with each breath. This simple practice anchors your focus in the present moment. After a few cycles, you'll likely sense a calmer energy. With that calm comes a readiness to handle challenges. Whether you're preparing for a difficult conversation or stepping onto a stage, your body and mind can support each other instead of working at cross purposes. Next, incorporate gentle acts of bravery into daily life. This doesn't require grand gestures. Instead, look for small moments where you can assert your presence, like offering an idea in a meeting or striking up a brief conversation with someone new. Notice how you hold your body in these moments. Stand or sit with a composure that signals self-assurance. Even if nerves bubble inside, the act of presenting yourself confidently can build a powerful feedback loop. You demonstrate to your own mind that you can handle the situation, which in turn reduces the intensity of self-doubt. Each of these micro-acts of courage compounds, creating a cumulative effect that fortifies genuine belief in your own capabilities. As you progress, remain aware that embodied confidence is not about faking it. It's about aligning your outward posture with the inner trust you're developing in yourself. When your actions, thoughts, and body language match, you create a congruence that others can sense, and most importantly, you can sense it too. This authenticity often translates into clearer communication and more fulfilling relationships, because people respond to your balanced presence. You're less likely to overcompensate by dominating conversations or retreating in social settings. Instead, you navigate interactions with a grounded assurance that welcomes mutual respect and understanding. Observe how this sense of embodiment influences your emotional states overall. When adversity strikes, you might still feel rattled, but you have tools to recenter, posture, and breath. You can pause, realign your spine, and take a mindful breath, regaining a sense of agency over whatever emotional chaos might be unfolding. This doesn't eliminate challenges, but it shifts you from helpless reactivity to mindful response. The physical dimension offers a tangible anchor, reminding you that no matter how turbulent your thoughts become, you can steady yourself in the present moment. By weaving these insights into daily life, you set the stage for consistent growth in self-assurance. Your body becomes an ally rather than a betrayer of your nerves, and your mind, bolstered by a reliable physical anchor, becomes more resilient under stress. This resilience lays a foundation for turning intentions into consistent action, an integral step in truly manifesting your desires. In the next chapter, you'll focus on translating emotional mastery into aligned, purposeful steps that inch you ever closer to the reality you envision. Embodied confidence, once internalized, naturally supports and accelerates every step you choose to take. Chapter 14. Aligning action. Think about a goal you've cherished for a long time, maybe running a marathon, launching a creative project, or building a more nurturing social circle. Often, the gap between where you stand and where you want to be feels daunting, leading to scattered attempts that produce little momentum. This chapter helps you bridge that gap through a deliberate approach, aligning your day-to-day actions with the emotional shifts you've cultivated. When the steps you take match your internal clarity, each choice, however small, moves you forward with a sense of purpose and genuine conviction. It's all too easy to accumulate knowledge without implementing it, particularly when emotional baggage once held you back. By now, You've learned how to recognize, transform, and harness your feelings. The next phase involves channeling that insight into consistent acts that mirror your deeper longings. Alignment here means your outer actions spring directly from your refined self-awareness, rather than from impulse or external pressure. This purposeful coordination forms the engine of manifestation, where your emotional evolution starts influencing tangible reality. Begin by breaking your overarching goal into micro steps, each simple enough to accomplish without undue stress. For instance, if your desire is to cultivate more supportive friendships, a micro step might be sending a brief message to someone you appreciate, suggesting a casual chat or a shared activity. You aren't signing up for a massive commitment. You're simply moving from intention to a small but real expression of it. These tiny victories chip away at self-doubt, reinforcing the emotional conviction that you can create the life you envision. After each small step, pause to check in with your feelings. Do you feel encouraged, or do new fears pop up? By noting these emotional responses, you can adjust your subsequent actions to stay in harmony with your values. If anxiety arises, recall the tools you've developed, breathing techniques, posture adjustments, or even a moment of self-compassion. This cycle of action and reflection ensures each move is truly aligned with your evolving emotional state, rather than forcing yourself down a predetermined route. Over time, the process fosters an intuitive rhythm. You become adept at discerning which actions resonate with your sense of purpose and which feel forced or incongruent. Accountability can further support this alignment. Share your goal with someone who respects your journey, whether it's a friend, mentor, or supportive online group. Check in periodically to discuss your progress. This isn't about external validation, it's about reinforcing your commitment through shared reflection. When challenges surface, talking them through with a trusted ally can help you see how emotional habits, like procrastination or perfectionism, might be creeping back. Together, you can brainstorm actionable ways to move forward without sacrificing your newfound emotional clarity. Remember that aligned action isn't linear. You'll encounter setbacks and plateaus. You might discover a particular step that looked straightforward on paper triggers deeper insecurities. Embrace these moments as learning experiences rather than signs of defeat. Each obstacle can be reframed as evidence of growth. Problems often become visible only when you push beyond your comfort zone. By approaching hurdles with curiosity, you maintain a momentum fueled by authenticity, not by forced discipline. As you reflect on this approach, notice how it shifts your internal dialogue from "I should do this" to "I choose to do this." That shift is significant, transforming obligation into empowerment. You're not chasing goals to prove your worth. You're engaging in actions that fulfill your evolving sense of purpose. This mindset alleviates the pressure that often accompanies self-improvement attempts, allowing you to savor progress rather than fear failure. In truth, each step you take in alignment with your inner work is a success in its own right, carrying the imprint of your genuine self. Ultimately, when your actions consistently mirror the changes you've initiated within, you create a life that reflects your deepest aspirations. The synergy of emotional mastery and practical effort propels you into a flow where desire and reality inch closer together. This path leads to sustainable growth, the topic of the next and final chapter. There, you'll discover how to maintain the shifts you've worked hard to achieve, ensuring that every insight gained remains woven into the fabric of your everyday existence. Chapter 15. Sustainable Growth. Reflect on a moment in your life when you felt a surge of progress. Perhaps you made a bold decision, healed a key relationship, or discovered a newfound sense of purpose. Often, these breakthroughs feel exhilarating at first, only to be tested by the ordinary demands of daily life. This final chapter focuses on how to integrate every emotional and behavioral shift you've cultivated into a self-sustaining cycle of growth. Rather than seeking a grand finale, you recognize transformation as an ongoing process that evolves with each new season of your life. A significant part of sustaining change lies in regular self-audits. Just as you might periodically check your financial health or fitness routine, set aside time to review your emotional well-being. Ask, am I falling back into old patterns? What triggers do I notice creeping up? Regular reflection helps you spot subtle regressions before they take firm root. Instead of criticizing yourself if you find slippage, treat it as a signal to revisit the tools you've learned: presence, mindful choice, or self-compassion. These small course corrections keep you aligned, ensuring that incremental backslides don't derail the larger journey. Equally important is refreshing your motivations. Your why may shift over time as circumstances and priorities evolve. For instance, a desire for emotional mastery might start as a quest for personal peace, only to expand into a commitment to be a better role model for loved ones. By consciously updating your sense of purpose, you fuel a sense of progress that motivates ongoing effort. It also prevents complacency, reminding you that growth isn't a static achievement but a living, dynamic part of who you are. Celebration, though sometimes overlooked, plays a pivotal role. Acknowledge the milestones, large or small, that mark your journey. If you once snapped at loved ones under stress, but now pause to breathe, that shift deserves recognition. These celebrations don't need to be elaborate. Even a moment of quiet appreciation can reinforce positive behaviors and attitudes. By honoring your progress, you create a feedback loop of encouragement, lessening the temptation to slip into old doubts. Each celebration stands as a beacon of evidence that change is possible and ongoing. As life continues, you may notice your emotional landscape evolving in tandem with new responsibilities or aspirations. The key is to remain open to refining your methods. Perhaps your meditation practice could benefit from variety, or your approach to setting boundaries needs updating in a changing work environment. Flexibility keeps your growth sustainable because it acknowledges that you're not a static entity. Rather, you're someone continually learning, adapting, and rewriting your story. This willingness to update your strategies fosters resilience, making it easier to handle unanticipated twists or challenges. At times, you might feel the urge to push even further, to take on new challenges, test new methods of self-discovery, or deepen your emotional intelligence. Lean into that urge with thoughtful intention. Each new level of exploration can enrich your understanding of who you are and what you can offer the world. But be mindful of pacing. Personal growth thrives on a balance between eagerness and self-care. Pushing too hard can lead to burnout, while too much caution may hinder evolution. Stay attuned to your internal signals, letting your intuition guide the next step in your ongoing journey. By weaving these elements together, self-audits, refreshed motivations, simple celebrations, adaptive strategies, and intuitive pacing, you craft a lifestyle that naturally supports your emotional mastery. Rather than viewing the insights from these chapters as a phase you'll outgrow, you see them as threads in a tapestry that continues to expand. With each day, you integrate everything you've learned: awareness of your inner world, the courage to be vulnerable, the power of choice, the relief of surrendering what you can't control, and the satisfaction of aligning action with genuine desire. In this way, you've arrived at a place beyond mere self-improvement. You've stepped into ongoing self-creation, an ever-deepening process that remains alive and responsive. Embrace that sense of vitality, knowing that there isn't a final destination but rather a continuum of unfolding possibilities. Each challenge or change you encounter can be met with the tools and awareness you now carry. As you stand on the cusp of whatever comes next, trust in your capacity to continue shaping your life in alignment with the truth of who you are. That trust, ultimately, is the heart of sustainable growth, an enduring belief in your ability to navigate life's currents while remaining rooted in your own evolving, authentic self.